So picture this. I walk into the hotel room after a long day of traveling, expecting the usual setup. 2 beds, some space, maybe a mini fridge stocked with overpriced snacks. But nope, instead, there's just one bed. One singular, gloriously unshared bed. And it's not like the room was tiny or anything. It was actually pretty roomy, which made it even weirder. I mean, how do you accidentally book a hotel room for 2 people and get just one bed? This is where things get interesting, because I wasn't exactly alone. I was with Ben, my best friend, and the guy I'd been secretly crushing on for what felt like forever but had never actually told him. Yeah, the kind of complicated, quiet thing where your brain constantly tries to ignore the obvious but your heart is screaming. We'd decided to take this little weekend trip together, almost on a whim, to get away from our usual city grind. Just 2 friends escaping reality for a bit, or so I told myself. I remember standing there, suitcase in one hand, phone in the other, staring at the bed like my brain was trying to solve a math problem it wasn't prepared for. Ben just shrugged, looking equally puzzled but way less worried. "Maybe they messed up the booking," he said, flashing that easy smile of his, the one that always made my chest tighten. "We can ask for another room or just deal with it." "Deal with it?" I repeated, half laughing, half panicking inside. Because, yeah, sharing a bed with Ben was suddenly a whole new level of uncomfortable and thrilling all at once. We'd always been super chill, never crossing that line, but now the line was staring right at us, bold and impossible to ignore. The hotel lobby was kind of a blur. I was definitely distracted, trying to figure out how to bring this up without making things weird. But Ben? He was just calm, cracking jokes about budget travel perks while tossing his backpack onto the bed. That moment, standing there in that slightly too small room with one bed, I realized this stupid mistake might actually be exactly what we needed. Or at least, that's what I tried to convince myself. I'm sitting on the edge of the bed now, telling myself this is fine, just a minor hiccup. But every time Ben moves, the bed creaks a little, and I feel this electric buzz that has nothing to do with the faulty mattress. Somehow, in this awkward setup, everything feels different, more real, more possible. And honestly, I have no idea what's about to happen next, but I kind of can't wait to find out. Ben stretched out on the bed like it was a throne, legs sprawled and arms behind his head, giving off this effortless, I'm totally fine with this vibe. Meanwhile, I was over here, trying to convince myself that it wasn't a big deal, but also hyper-aware of how close he was. Closer than we'd ever been before. "So," he said, turning his head to look at me, "what's the plan? Sleep on opposite edges and pretend we're not silently freaking out?" I laughed, which felt a little too nervous. "Yeah, something like that. I mean, I'm not exactly used to this." I waved a hand vaguely between us, gesturing at the single bed. "Neither am I," Ben admitted, sitting up a bit, his expression softer now. "But hey, maybe it's a sign we should just stop pretending we're not friends with benefits or something." The way he said it was teasing, but there was an edge of seriousness I couldn't miss. I froze for a moment, trying to process. "Friends with what?" I asked, my voice probably sounding way shakier than I wanted. "You know," he said, smirking, "like you and me. More than friends. Maybe less than a full-on relationship. Just something real." He shrugged, like it was the most obvious thing in the world, but I could see the vulnerability behind it. It was like he just pulled the curtain back on something I'd been hiding from myself. I felt my throat go dry. "You think this bed situation is a sign?" I joked, but I wasn't really joking. "Maybe," he replied, grinning. "Either way, it's forcing us to confront stuff we've been avoiding. Like, literally." I looked at the bed again, suddenly feeling like it wasn't just a piece of furniture, but some kind of metaphor for all the unsaid things between us. Later that night, we finally settled in, each claiming a side of the bed that was maybe a foot apart. I was hyper-aware of every small noise, the rustle of the sheets, the creak when he shifted, the steady rhythm of his breathing. It was weird, being this close without it being completely casual. I kept thinking about all the times we'd hung out, safe in our friendship zone, and how fragile that seemed now. At some point, Ben reached over, maybe unconsciously, and his hand brushed against mine. It was a quick touch, but enough to send a spark up my arm. I didn't pull away. Instead, I turned to face him, heart pounding like I'd just run a mile. "Is this okay?" he asked quietly. I nodded before I even had time to overthink it. "Yeah, it's more than okay." We didn't say much after that, just let the silence fill the space between us, but it wasn't awkward silence. It was the kind of quiet that happens when two people are on the edge of something new, something unspoken but electric. The next morning I woke up to the sunlight streaming through the curtains, and Ben's arm draped over my waist. My first impulse was to freak out. Then I realized I didn't want to. Somehow, this accidental bed situation had shifted everything. We spent the day exploring the city, walking through little coffee shops, poking around bookstores, trying street food neither of us had before. It was like we were seeing each other for the first time, with this new layer of something deeper underneath all the jokes and easy camaraderie. At one point, we found a tiny park bench tucked away behind a row of bushes. We sat side by side, and Ben took my hand again, this time without hesitation. "I don't want to pretend anymore," he said, looking straight into my eyes. "Me neither," I told him, feeling like I was finally speaking the truth I'd kept buried. That trip, the one that started with a hotel mix-up, turned into something unexpected but real. And honestly, I think that one bed was the best mistake we ever made. Back at the hotel that evening, I was still buzzing from how natural everything had felt outside. Walking hand in hand, laughing like idiots over some ridiculous joke Ben made about street vendors selling authentic tacos that tasted suspiciously like breakfast burritos. But here, inside the quiet room with that one bed, the air felt charged with a kind of nervous excitement I wasn't quite ready to name. Ben tossed his bag onto the floor and stretched, looking relaxed. "So," he said, grinning a little too knowingly, "what now? Do we pretend this was just a vacation fling? Or—" I ran a hand through my hair, trying to steady my racing thoughts. "I don't want to pretend, not just for this trip, I want to see where this goes." The words felt huge coming out of my mouth, but they also felt right. He moved closer on the bed, close enough that I could see the faint freckles along his nose, and the way his eyes softened when he looked at me. "I've wanted that for a long time," he said, voice low. "I just didn't know if he did." My heart did that stupid, uncontrollable leap thing. I was scared, I admitted. Scared it would mess everything up between us. Ben shook his head like he was brushing off a bad thought. "You're my best friend. Nothing could mess that up." "Not really." Then he smiled. That quiet, genuine smile that made me want to memorize every inch of him. We talked for a while longer, about what this meant, about how we could take it slow and figure it out without losing what we already had. It felt like the start of something real, not just the messy crush I'd been hiding for years, but an actual chance at us. Later, lying there side by side, our fingers intertwined, I realized that bed was no longer just a bed. It was a place where the line between friendship and something more blurred, in the best possible way. The next morning, neither of us rushed to get up. Instead, we lay there, talking about everything and nothing. Our dreams, stupid childhood memories, the kind of music we secretly loved but never admitted. It was easy, like falling into a comfortable rhythm we hadn't known we were missing. At one point, Ben looked at me and said, "You know, if we'd gotten 2 beds like we thought, none of this would have happened." I laughed, but it was a little bittersweet. Yeah, the universe has weird ways of sorting things out. As the trip wound down, we promised to keep this going, to be honest with each other and not let fear get in the way. Back home, things weren't always perfect. There were awkward moments, jealousies, and the occasional doubt. But every time I thought about that tiny hotel room and that one bed, I remembered how everything changed in a single night. That stupid hotel mistake turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to us. And honestly, I wouldn't change a thing. Back home, reality hit in all its usual messy glory. Work deadlines, family stuff, and the general chaos of everyday life tried their best to drown out whatever spark had started during that weekend. But honestly, every time I felt overwhelmed, I'd catch myself smiling at some little thing, like a text from Ben asking if I wanted to hang out, or a goofy meme he sent that perfectly got my sense of humor. We started spending more time together, but it wasn't the same as before. There was this new layer underneath our friendship, something soft and tentative, but definitely there. Our conversations went from casual banter to those quiet, late-night talks where you reveal the weird, vulnerable stuff you don't share with just anyone. I remember this one night, a couple of weeks after the trip. We were sitting on my couch, sharing a pizza that was way too greasy but somehow perfect. It was late, and the city outside was buzzing with life, but inside, it was just us. Ben looked at me with that kind of look that made my stomach flip. "Do you think this could work?" he asked, voice quieter than usual. I swallowed, trying to figure out if he meant us. Like, more us, or something more casual. "I want it to," I said honestly, "but I'm scared too. Scared of losing you." He reached over and took my hand, fingers curling around mine like a lifeline. Maybe that's what makes it worth it. That night, I realized something important. Sometimes the scariest things are the ones that matter most. Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were moments when I caught myself doubting if Ben felt the same way, or if I was just reading too much into everything. Like the time he canceled plans last minute without a clear reason, and I spent hours spinning scenarios in my head, or when I wasn't sure if I should text first or wait for him to reach out. One afternoon, a few months in, I was at a coffee shop, nervously waiting for Ben to arrive. We'd agreed to meet up after work, but he was late. I might have been overthinking, picturing all kinds of reasons why he'd suddenly pull away. When he finally showed up, flustered and apologetic, I shoved down the urge to lecture him and just smiled. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, sitting down and running a hand through his hair. "Just stuff at work. Nothing to do with us." I nodded, but I couldn't help feeling like maybe us was still this fragile thing we both tiptoed around. That's when I realized that building something real with someone, especially someone you've been friends with forever, isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, even when it's messy or scary. One night, a few weeks after that coffee shop incident, we ended up back at my place. It was raining outside, and the kind of quiet had settled in that makes you want to lean into someone. We sat side by side on the couch, and I could feel the weight of everything unsaid between us. Without thinking, I leaned my head on Ben's shoulder. He didn't pull away. Instead, he shifted a little, resting his head against mine. "Feels like this is where we're meant to be," he murmured. I closed my eyes, letting the moment stretch out. For the first time, I wasn't scared of what might happen next. Because whatever it was, we were facing it together. Looking back, it's crazy how a simple hotel mistake, just one bed, ended up changing everything. It forced us into a space where we couldn't hide, where the truth had to come out. And maybe that's the weirdest, most beautiful kind of magic there is. Now, when I think about that trip, that tiny room, and the bed that brought us closer than I ever expected, I smile. Because sometimes, life's biggest surprises come from the most unexpected places. And sometimes, all it takes is one unexpected bed to find where you truly belong. A few months after we'd settled into this new us thing, life started throwing in its usual curveballs, mostly in the form of our jobs getting crazier than ever. Ben and I worked in similar fields, creative, deadline-heavy, and unpredictable, which meant our schedules rarely lined up perfectly. But somehow, we made it work, mostly by stealing moments here and there. One evening, I was at my apartment, half distracted by emails, when my phone buzzed. It was Ben, with a simple message. "You awake?" I smiled, immediately texting back, "Always for you." A few minutes later, he was at my door, rain dripping off his jacket, and that signature, slightly mischievous grin on his face. "Thought you could use a break," he said, stepping inside. We ended up on the couch, sharing a bottle of cheap wine and talking about everything and nothing. It was one of those nights where the world outside just faded away, and it felt like it was just the two of us against whatever chaos was lurking beyond my front door. At some point, Ben reached over and took my hand. His fingers were warm, steady, and the look in his eyes was different, softer, more certain. "I've been thinking," he said quietly, "about how crazy it is that we almost didn't take that trip. What if we'd never gone? What if the hotel hadn't messed up?" I squeezed his hand, feeling my chest tighten. "I don't want to think about that. It's too weird to imagine." He laughed softly. "Yeah, me too." Then, almost as if the words were already written in the air, he leaned in. Our lips met, tentative at first, like testing the waters, but then deeper, more urgent. It was the kind of kiss that felt like coming home after a long, exhausting journey. When we pulled apart, I rested my forehead against his. "I've wanted that for so long." "Me too," he whispered. That night marked a new chapter, but it wasn't just about the romance. It was about trust, about finally letting down the walls we'd both built around ourselves. Because for all the jokes and easy smiles, Ben and I had been guarding parts of us that weren't so easy to share. In the weeks that followed, we found ourselves carving out a little world that was ours. There were lazy Sunday mornings making breakfast together, evenings spent binge-watching shows we pretended we didn't love, and spontaneous road trips fueled by nowhere special to go but just wanting to be together. But as close as we were, there were still moments when the past crept in. Insecurities about how this would all work long-term, worries about what other people might think, and the unspoken question of whether we were ready to fully be seen. One evening, after a particularly rough day at work, I found myself staring at my phone, debating whether to call Ben or just sit alone with my thoughts. Then my phone lit up with a message. "Come over. I need you." I grabbed my keys and went straight to his place, where I found him pacing, frustration written all over his face. "Work's been hell," he admitted as soon as I walked in. "And I hate feeling like I'm dragging you into it." I crossed the room and pulled him into a hug. "You're not dragging me anywhere. We're in this together." He looked up, eyes searching mine. "I'm scared this won't last. That one day, you'll decide I'm not enough." I shook my head, voice steady. "Then, you're everything, and I'm not going anywhere." That night, as we lay tangled up in each other's arms, I realized that love isn't about avoiding fear or uncertainty. It's about choosing someone again and again, even when the future's unclear. Months turned into a year, and we kept building on that foundation, sometimes shaky, sometimes rock solid. The one bed in that hotel room had been a mistake, sure, but it was also the start of something neither of us saw coming. Now, when I think about that night, I'm grateful for the mix-up, because sometimes the universe has a funny way of pushing you exactly where you need to be, even if it means sharing a bed with your best friend and discovering that maybe, just maybe, the best place to fall asleep is wrapped up in someone you've secretly loved all along. By the time summer rolled around, Ben and I had settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal, if you ignore the occasional butterflies that still showed up when he smiled at me across the room, or the way my stomach flipped when he reached for my hand in public. I guess some things don't get old, no matter how long you've known someone. One Friday afternoon, Ben called me out of the blue. "Hey, you want to do something different this weekend? No plans, just us." I hesitated for a second. "Like what? I'm all ears." "There's this little cabin upstate. Quiet, no Wi-Fi, no distractions. Thought we could escape the city for a bit." I could almost hear the excitement in his voice, and it was contagious. Sounds perfect. Packing that weekend was an adventure in itself, more because I was nervous about spending so much time alone with him without the usual distractions. But when we finally got there, everything else faded away. The cabin was cozy, with just enough space for 2 people and a fireplace that looked like it came straight out of a movie. Outside, the trees were starting to turn gold, and the air smelled like pine and something fresh that only the forest can offer. That first night, we cooked dinner together, fumbling with recipes and laughing when things inevitably went wrong. We sat close by the fire afterward, sharing stories about our childhoods, our dreams, and those little hopes we rarely admitted out loud. At some point, Ben reached over and took my hand. "I love this," he said softly. "Just you and me, away from everything." "Me too," I agreed, squeezing his fingers. But as the night wore on, I noticed a flicker of hesitation in his eyes, something I hadn't seen before. "What's on your mind?" I asked. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's just, sometimes I wonder if I'm holding you back. If you deserve someone who's more sure of themselves." I blinked, caught off guard. "Ben, that's ridiculous. You're one of the most amazing people I know. Don't sell yourself short." He looked down, voice barely above a whisper. "I just don't want to be the reason you stop chasing your dreams." I pulled him closer. "You're not a reason for anything except happiness. And maybe a little distraction, but the good kind." We sat there a while longer, the fire crackling between us, and I realized this was the first time we were talking, not just about what we wanted, but what scared us too. The next day, we went for a hike. The trail wound through the woods, and with every step, the tension seemed to ease between us. Halfway up, Ben stopped and looked out over the valley below. "Remember when we were stuck in that hotel room?" he asked, a grin spreading across his face. "Yeah," I laughed. One bed, zero personal space, and a million feelings I wasn't ready for. He nudged me with his elbow. "It changed everything, didn't it?" It did. And honestly, I wouldn't change a thing. We kept walking, the sun filtering through the trees, and I felt like maybe this was what love was supposed to be. Messy, a little scary, but also kind of beautiful in the way it makes you see the world differently. That night, back at the cabin, Ben surprised me with a small box. Inside was a simple necklace with a tiny charm, a bed no bigger than a thumbprint. "For the nights when you forget how it all started," he said with a smirk. I laughed, touched, and a little overwhelmed. "You're ridiculous." "Maybe," he admitted, "but I'm your ridiculous now." We fell asleep that night wrapped up in each other, the weight of the past months settling into something warm and steady. Driving back to the city the next day, I looked over at Ben, sunlight catching the freckles on his nose, and felt a wave of gratitude. The hotel mistake, the accidental bed, the awkward closeness, it had all been the start of this journey, and as much as I wanted to plan out what came next, part of me was okay with not knowing. Because sometimes, the best things happen when you just let go and trust the ride. So yeah, maybe one bed was a mistake, but it was the kind of mistake that changed everything. And sometimes that's exactly what you need. Back in the city, things didn't suddenly become picture perfect. If anything, they felt more real, more complicated, but in a way that somehow made me feel more alive. We were figuring out what it meant to be more than friends, without losing the comfort we'd built over years. And honestly, it wasn't always easy. One evening, about a month after the cabin trip, I was sitting on my couch scrolling through my phone when Ben knocked softly and then popped his head in. "Hey, you up for grabbing some dinner? I found this new spot. Kinda casual, but their burgers are supposed to be insane." I smiled, setting my phone down. "I'm starving. Let me just grab my jacket." We ended up at this tiny hole-in-the-wall joint with neon signs and a playlist full of 90s hits. There was something effortlessly relaxed about it. The kind of place where you could show up in sneakers and still feel like you belonged. As we waited for our food, Ben leaned in and said, "You know, I've been thinking about what you said, about taking a chance on us. I want to be sure I'm doing this right, that I'm not messing it up." I studied his face, the way his eyes searched mine for reassurance. "You're not messing anything up," I told him honestly. "We're both learning. And honestly, it's kind of nice to not have it all figured out yet." His shoulders relaxed and he nodded, smiling that goofy smile I'd come to love. Our burgers arrived, messy and delicious, and we spent the rest of the night sharing fries and stories. Somewhere between laughing about a terrible date he'd had years ago and debating who would survive longer in a zombie apocalypse, I realized how much I'd missed this, being completely myself around someone who actually got me. Later, walking back to my place, the city lights blurred as we held hands. Then, out of nowhere, Ben stopped and looked at me with this intensity that made my heart race. "Can I ask you something? Anything. Are you scared? Like, really scared?" "Because I am." I paused, thinking about the nights I'd spent awake, wondering if I was ready to let someone in fully. "Yeah," I admitted, "but maybe that's okay. Maybe being scared means it matters." He smiled, pulling me closer. "Yeah, it does." That night, as we lay tangled together, I thought about how far we'd come, from a hotel room with one bed to figuring out what love really meant. The mistakes, the awkward moments, the uncertainty, it all felt like part of the story we were writing together. A few weeks later, we had a weekend planned to visit his family. Meeting the people who shape the person you love is always nerve-wracking, and I was no exception. Ben tried to calm my nerves with jokes and reassurances, but I could tell he was a little anxious too. His family welcomed me with warmth and teasing, which was a relief. Over dinner, his mom asked what I did for work, and I felt myself relax as conversation flowed. Ben squeezed my hand under the table, and I caught the exact moment when his eyes met mine. A silent thank you for being there. That trip reminded me that love isn't just about the two of you. It's about the worlds you bring together, the people who become part of your story. After we got back, things felt different in the best way. More solid, like we were building something that could last. We started talking about future trips, maybe even living together someday. Small steps that felt huge because of what they represented. One night, while cooking dinner, Ben looked up and said, "I know it's only been a year since that weird hotel trip, but I can't imagine my life without you." I smiled, stirring the sauce. "Me neither. That mistake turned out to be the best thing that ever happened." He grinned. Guess the universe knew what it was doing. As I finished cleaning up, I realized that sometimes the most unexpected situations push you into the moments that change everything. One bed was just the beginning. Now it's the foundation for everything we're building together. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. A year later, I'm sitting on that same couch where Ben and I once nervously shared pizza and secrets, and I'm thinking about how much has changed and how much hasn't. We've lived together for 6 months now, moved into a tiny apartment that's cluttered with books, plants, and way too many coffee mugs, but it's ours. It's the kind of messy, imperfect space that feels like home. Last weekend, we went back to that hotel where it all started. The lobby looked the same, but the memory of that single bed felt like a lifetime ago. We stood outside our old room, laughing at how ridiculous the whole situation was. Ben nudged me and said, "Remember how awkward we were? And now look at us." I smiled and squeezed his hand. Yeah, one bed was the best mistake the universe ever made. That night, we didn't even bring up the bed or the past explicitly. Instead, we just enjoyed each other's company, talking late into the night, the kind of conversation filled with easy laughter and comfortable silences. What I've learned through all this is that love isn't about grand gestures or perfect timing. It's about those small, quiet moments, the hand you hold when everything feels uncertain, the honesty to say, "I'm scared," and still show up. It's about choosing someone again and again, even when life gets complicated. Ben and I still have our ups and downs, of course. We argue over silly things, get frustrated, and sometimes wonder what the future holds. But now, those moments don't shake me the way they used to, because I know we're in it together. As I look over at Ben, curled up reading on the couch, I feel a warmth that's steady and true. That accidental bed, that unexpected closeness, it was never just about sharing space. It was about finding the courage to be real with each other. And in the end, that's what matters the most. Sometimes, the universe's mistakes are just the invitations we need to discover something beautiful. And for me, that one bed was the start of everything,